Indonesia just blew up over a paycheck. 6 people dead, streets in flames, and lawmakers running for cover because they handed themselves a $3,000 monthly salary bonus. Now, flip the globe. In West Africa, a young captain named Ibrahim Traoré was offered not thousands, but $60 billion. And instead of grabbing it, he shoved it off the table. That's the punchline. Jakarta rioted over crumbs. Ouagadougou refused a mountain. Which one sounds more insane? People dying over a perk or a leader saying no to a fortune? Before we dive in, let me throw this at you. Where are you watching from? And what number would push you over the edge? Is it a politician's paycheck? A corrupt perk? Comment it below. Your answer says a lot more than you think. This is Africa Daily Good News, the channel where we don't sugarcoat, we don't recycle headlines. We pull the threads that connect Jakarta traffic jams to West African revolutions, and, yes, to your own paycheck in America. Because after all, politics isn't over there. It's the same game everywhere: power, pride, and the price of dignity. So let's roll back the tape. Jakarta's $3,000 salary scandal lit the streets on fire, and it sets the stage for a much bigger number: $60 billion in Ouagadougou. $3,000. That's the number that broke Indonesia. On paper, it was dressed up as a housing allowance. In reality, it was a self-voted salary boost. Lawmakers paying themselves 10 times what the average worker makes. At first, it looked like just another noisy campus protest. Students with painted signs shouting about corruption. Jakarta has seen it before. But then, something snapped. The crowds swelled. Motorbike drivers, teachers, vendors, people who usually stay quiet joined in. And after that, the mood turned from chants to clashes. Police rolled out tear gas. Barricades went up. Social media filled with clips of coughing students and burning tires. And then came the moment no spin doctor could erase. An ordinary motorbike rider crushed under an armored vehicle. His name? Forgotten. His face? Everywhere. That's how injustice works. People ignore abstract numbers, budgets, deficits, inflation charts, but give them one face, one story, and they explode. Americans do the same. Nobody loses sleep over trillions in national debt, but let one senator blow taxpayer money on a vacation, and suddenly everyone's furious. A Jakarta taxi driver put it perfectly. I drive, I eat, I sleep. That's my life. But if they can take $3,000 every month, why can't I feed my kids? It wasn't about ideology. It was about survival math. And survival math always wins. Here's the irony. Lawmakers thought they were buying comfort with that salary perk. Instead, they bought chaos. 6 dead, hundreds injured, markets rattled, and a capital city choking on tear gas. A cheap bonus turned into the most expensive mistake they've ever made. And yet the real twist isn't only about Indonesia. It's about the human equation. When humiliation feels visible, when the gap between rulers and ruled becomes a slap in the face, patience collapses. That's why Jakarta burned. And that's why, thousands of miles away, another leader's refusal of billions suddenly mattered even more. 6 deaths should have been enough to scare lawmakers into silence. But the strangest part? They thought canceling the $3,000 salary perk would fix everything, as if public trust works like a receipt you can return. That's the absurd math of politics. You pocket the cash, people bleed, and then you imagine a press release will rewind history. But Indonesians weren't buying it. The anger didn't stop when the perk disappeared. It deepened. Crowds grew beyond Jakarta, spreading to Yogyakarta, Surabaya, Medan. Students shouted first, but then shopkeepers, clerks, even teachers joined in. People who had never attended a rally suddenly felt they couldn't stay home. And after that, silence is betrayal became more than a phrase. It was a banner painted on city walls. And here's the irony. What sparked this wasn't hunger or unemployment alone. It was humiliation. When people feel poor, they adapt. When they feel insulted, they revolt. According to behavioral research, humans, if they can, tolerate years of economic struggle as long as it feels shared. But when elites flaunt perks in plain sight, the patience evaporates overnight. Americans know this too. Most shrug at trillion-dollar deficits, but they rage when one congressman sneaks in a first-class flight on taxpayer money. It's not the size of the number, it's the sting of the insult. Take the story of a food delivery rider in Jakarta. He admitted he knew nothing about government budgets. "I deliver, I sleep, I repeat," he told local media. But when he saw videos of lawmakers defending their perks while a motorbike driver lay dead, he left his shift and joined the protests. He said, "I don't care about politics, but if I stay quiet, they'll keep taking." That is not ideology, that's instinct. And instinct spreads faster than ideology ever could. So what began as a technical salary perk turned into a referendum on trust. Leaders gambled 3,000 and lost far more, their legitimacy. Because after all, people don't riot over math problems, they riot over symbols. And once the symbol takes hold, once a perk becomes betrayal, or a crushed rider becomes the face of a system, you can't legislate the rage away. And this is where the paradox sharpens. In Jakarta, a small allowance created an inferno. But thousands of miles away, in Ouagadougou, a far larger number, 60 billion, was pushed off the table. And instead of riots, that choice carried calm, even pride. Which leaves a bigger question hanging. Why did Crumbs ignite one nation while a fortune fortified another? $60 billion on the table, one of the poorest nations in the world, and the answer was no. That's not how the script is supposed to go. Most governments spend years begging for loans, chasing aid, and trading resources just to keep the lights on. And yet in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré looked at 60 billion and called it what it was, a leash dressed as a gift. The offer came packaged in friendly words: partnership, development, stability. But Africans have heard those words before. They came with France's troops, with IMF loans, with contracts that always seemed to leave gold and oil flowing out while dependency flowed in. So when Traoré refused, it wasn't only about the money, it was about breaking a cycle. And that shock rippled faster than the billions ever could. Maybe this is why his decision resonated so loudly. Human beings, if they can, cling to certainty. A steady paycheck, even if small, feels safer than a risky gamble. That's why so many leaders, in Washington, Brussels, Abuja, choose compromise. They sell small pieces of pride for the illusion of stability. But Traoré chose the opposite. He gambled on uncertainty, betting that dignity would outlast dollars. To Western eyes, it looked reckless. To many Africans, it looked like the first honest move in decades. And here's a short story that makes it real. A young teacher in Ouagadougou had been planning to leave her country to find work abroad. But when she heard about the refusal, she admitted something changed. "Maybe it will be harder now," she said, "but at least I feel proud to stay." That isn't economics speaking, it's identity. Pride turned a political decision into a reason to root herself in place. It's also a before and after moment. Before, leaders acted like brokers, middlemen selling dignity for deals. After, at least in Burkina Faso, the leader stood as a guardian. That change is hard to quantify, but people feel it in their bones. And once people feel protected rather than sold, it reshapes the entire conversation. So the paradox grows sharper. In Indonesia, a few $1,000s tore the streets apart. In Burkina Faso, billions kept the streets quiet. One nation demanded dignity after it was denied. Another felt dignity in the act of refusal. Two very different numbers, but the same human equation. People will accept hardship longer than they'll accept humiliation. And when one leader refuses billions, the sound doesn't stay contained. It carries. It echoes across borders. And soon, what started as one man's defiance began to look like the foundation of something bigger. Three countries that were once treated as isolated problems suddenly walked onto the stage together. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, each one sanctioned, each one pressured. Each one told they'd collapse if they didn't bend. And then, instead of folding, they linked arms and called themselves the Sahel Alliance. For years, outsiders described them as weak. Overnight, weakness became unity. On paper, it sounded like rebellion. France was told to pack its troops and leave. ECOWAS suspended them. Aid packages froze, Credit ratings fell, and analysts in Brussels and Washington warned of disaster. But in the streets of Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou, the mood wasn't despair. It was festival. Flags waved, drums beat, voices rose, not about economics, but about freedom. That's what confused the outside world the most. Because from a Western lens, the numbers look terrifying. Billions in trade gone, foreign support cut, sanctions piling up. But humans don't live by spreadsheets alone. According to social research, people endure hardship when they believe it has meaning. That's why many Americans stick with tough jobs if they feel respected, even when the pay isn't great. The same principle now drives the Sahel. Before, survival meant dependence. After, survival meant standing taller, even if it cost more. A farmer in Tillabéri, Niger, put it in plain words. He admitted he didn't understand geopolitics, but he noticed his children chanting slogans in Hausa instead of French. "Maybe we are still poor," he said, "but at least my children feel this is their country." That detail won't appear in economic forecasts, but it reveals a transformation no market graph can measure. Identity replacing shame. And here's the twist no sanction planner saw coming. By trying to isolate these countries, outsiders only pushed them closer together. Psychologists note the same effect in small groups. Exclude people, and they bond tighter with whoever remains. High school cliques, immigrant neighborhoods, even soldiers under fire. When pushed away, humans create stronger ties. The Sahel Alliance is that principle scaled to nations. So what outsiders called instability felt like stability of a new kind. What elites framed as collapse, ordinary citizens framed as pride. And once that perspective shift takes hold, no analyst's chart can reverse it. Which leaves a lingering question. If three nations can flip the board together, what happens when others decide they're tired of playing by the old rules? Prices climbed, and instead of panic, people clapped. That's the contradiction the outside world couldn't wrap its head around. Sanctions were supposed to starve Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger into submission. Aid packages were frozen, imports slowed, markets downgraded. And yet, on the ground, families weren't marching against their leaders. They were defending them. Shops in Bamako and Niamey tell the story better than any policy brief. Rice, oil, and flour cost more, yes. Customers grumbled. But then, in the same breath, some of them justified the pain. A shopkeeper in Bamako explained it like this. Before, prices rose and nobody explained. Now I can say, it's because we chose to be free. Economists might roll their eyes at that logic, but it carried more weight than any chart. Because pride doesn't deflate like a currency does. Humans, if they can, accept hardship when they believe it serves dignity. That isn't an African trait. It's universal. Studies in American workplaces show job satisfaction is tied less to salary and more to whether people feel respected. That's why an underpaid worker may stay loyal to a boss who values them, but quit on the spot when they feel humiliated. The Sahel is living out that principle, just scaled to entire nations. And here's the twist. Sanctions were designed to fracture public support, but instead, they hardened it. Exclusion forged belonging. Sociologists note the same in immigrant communities across the U.S. When outsiders stigmatize them, identity grows sharper, loyalty grows thicker. What was supposed to break these states only bound them tighter. A farmer in Burkina Faso brought it down to earth. His harvest was weak, his profits thin, but when asked if he regretted the alliance, he shook his head. At least now I know who I'm struggling with and who I'm struggling for. That clarity, before absent, became a new source of strength. So the paradox deepens. On paper, the region lost billions. In reality, it gained something harder to measure. Legitimacy. And once citizens start to equate higher prices with higher pride, the rules of survival change. Because people can live with struggle, what they can't live with is shame. And that sets the stage for the final turn. If small perks can destroy trust in one country and lost billions can build it in another, then what does that say about the true cost of dignity? Indonesia scrapped the $3,000 lawmaker salary, but the fury didn't die. Burkina Faso rejected $60 billion, and the pride didn't fade. That contradiction alone shows the real balance sheet. Money doesn't decide trust, choices do. In Jakarta, politicians hoped repealing the perk would reset the clock. Committees announced inquiries. Press conferences promised reforms. But after blood spilled on the pavement, those gestures felt hollow. People remembered the crushed motorbike driver more than they remembered the apology. And after that, the streets no longer saw a government correcting itself. They saw a system too detached to matter. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, no aid flowed in, no new billions padded the budget, but the decision to refuse turned into something else, a national anchor. Before, leaders looked like brokers, trading away resources for temporary relief. After, they looked like guardians, however imperfect, standing between citizens and foreign hands. That shift didn't erase hardship, but it changed how hardship was understood. Humans, if they can, live with struggle when it feels like it carries dignity. Americans know this rhythm too. Surveys show most workers tolerate stress and low pay longer if they believe their boss respects them. But when that respect collapses, patience collapses with it. Indonesians rioted not because of economic math, but because humiliation became visible. West Africans rallied not because of wealth, but because dignity felt defended. Two short stories frame the paradox. In Yogyakarta, a student admitted he didn't care about politics but marched anyway. "If I stay home, I'm saying I accept," he told reporters. Silence became guilt. In Niamey, a teenager raised a cardboard sign that read, "We are not for sale." When asked what billions meant, she shrugged, "I just don't want to feel ashamed." Two continents, two different currencies, but the same instinct. And that's the twist within the twist. Small numbers can topple trust. Massive numbers can fortify it. Indonesia lost legitimacy trying to grab crumbs. Burkina Faso gained legitimacy by throwing away a feast. Economists will tally deficits and sanctions, but ordinary people will remember who made them feel humiliated and who made them feel proud. So the story circles back to one truth. Money disappears. Memory doesn't. And once dignity becomes the currency people value most, no bailout, no bonus, no billions can compete with its weight. Sometimes the smallest numbers break a nation, and the largest numbers hold one together. Indonesia unraveled over a $3,000 salary perk. Burkina Faso stood firm by rejecting $60 billion. On paper, those figures don't belong in the same conversation. But in reality, both stories are about the same currency, dignity. Jakarta tried to fix trust with quick apologies and canceled perks. But after the smoke cleared, people remembered a crushed motorbike driver more than they remembered any promise. Ouagadougou, in contrast, chose a harder road, refusing billions and bracing for sanctions. Yet instead of collapse, what grew was loyalty. That's the paradox leaders often miss. You can survive without money longer than you can survive without respect. And maybe that's the universal lesson. Humans, if they can, endure struggle if it feels meaningful. Americans tolerate long commutes, debt, even job stress, as long as they believe the system is at least fair. Indonesians tolerated years of economic imbalance until one perk felt like a slap in the face. West Africans tolerated sanctions because refusal finally felt like a stand. The numbers were different, but the instinct was the same. A short story lingers here. A Jakarta taxi driver explained why he joined the march. "If they can take 3,000 every month, why can't I feed my kids?" In Ouagadougou, a young teacher decided not to leave her country after the refusal of billions. Harder maybe, but at least I feel proud. Two ordinary people, continents apart, both proving dignity isn't a luxury. It's survival. So maybe the question isn't how much money is on the table, it's how much trust is left in the room. Because once dignity is stripped, no sum repairs it. And once dignity is defended, no sanction can erase it. This is Africa Daily Good News. If you've stayed with us this far, hit subscribe, drop a like, and share this with someone who still thinks politics is only about numbers. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from and what price would push you over the edge? Stay close, because the next story won't be about perks or billions, but it will challenge what we think dignity is worth.